Notebook LM by Google AI proudly presents
Every hero is connected. Across time, across ages.
Every day rewrite your history. Every step you take defines your legacy.
You're listening to the Timeless Heroes, Timeless Podcast, where we take a deep dive at the story, the characters, the lore, and the world building of the most ambitious sci-fi novel series, Timeless Heroes. Every hero is connected, across time, across ages.
The pages of history.
I want to start today by placing you in a very specific physical space. Picture a suburban basement in the dead of summer.
Right, a classic setting.
Yeah, exactly. And usually a space like this has this faint domestic hum, like maybe a water heater kicking on or the low rumble of a washing machine.
Sure.
But this basement is entirely different. The air in this room is thick. It's practically vibrating.
And the smell, I imagine, is intense.
Oh, absolutely. It smells sharply of ozone, melting plastic, and burnt copper. And the concrete floor is just covered in this tangled web of glowing neon blue cables.
It's a complete hazard.
Totally. They're pulsing with this strange arrhythmic energy, and every single one of them converges on a folding card table right in the center of the room.
And on that table is the headset.
Yes, this heavily modified, Frankenstein-esque virtual reality headset. You are standing at ground zero of a teenage science experiment that is moments away from rewriting the laws of physics.
And it is about to go catastrophically wrong.
So wrong. Our mission today is to dive deep into this wild, chaotic summer. The summer where a quantum science prodigy named Hunt accidentally digitized the physical body of his best friend, Jace.
And banished his consciousness into a massive multiverse of actual video game worlds.
Right. It sounds like a sci-fi action movie. When I first read the source deck, I was like, this can't be real.
Oh, it's very real. And the deeper you get into the documentation, the more you realize this entire disaster is really anchored by profound psychological damage.
Yeah, the baggage these two teenagers were carrying is heavy.
Extremely heavy. You really cannot separate the science fiction elements from their psychological profiles. Those profiles are the catalyst for the whole situation.
So let's look at Hunt first. I mean, he's a quantum science prodigy.
Right. He possesses an intellect that lets him view the universe strictly through mathematics, coding, predictable systems. But he's also recovering from a prolonged period of severe personal trauma.
Which explains so much about his methods.
Exactly. For Hunt, science isn't just academic. It's a mechanism for survival. He uses the rigid rules of quantum mechanics to regain control over a life that, well, recently felt completely out of his hands.
I found myself really sympathizing with Hunt's need for order, especially when you contrast him with Jace.
Oh, they're total opposites.
Right. If Hunt is trying to build this perfectly stable architecture to protect himself, Jace is just a wrecking ball swinging freely through the room.
That's a great way to put it. Jace is charming, he's highly impulsive, and he navigates the world under this heavily armored persona.
The badass man of justice.
Yes, the badass man of justice. But the sources make it very clear that this persona is entirely a coping strategy.
Because of what happened in Vegas.
Right. Prior to this summer, Jace was forced to abandon his former identity. He used to be a boy named Takashi, but he had to escape the crosshairs of a Las Vegas crime syndicate.
He was literally being hunted by assassins.
For months, he had his agency violently stripped away from him. So as a result, he adopted this hyper-aggressive, fearless, risk-taking attitude.
To mask that deep, paralyzing sense of helplessness.
Precisely. He operates on pure impulse, because the moment he stops to actually analyze his situation, the trauma catches up to him.
So that dynamic is the powder keg. You've got the meticulously traumatized genius who desperately needs control.
And the impulsively traumatized thrill-seeker who just refuses to acknowledge danger.
Exactly. And that collision brings us to the big question of this deep dive. How does a simple summer coding project bridge the gap between human biological consciousness, space-time, and a 16-bit digital reality?
Well, answering that requires us to totally challenge our foundational understanding of what digital code actually is.
Right, because Hunt wasn't compiling standard binary data.
Not at all. Before we could even touch the physics of Jace getting digitized, we have to isolate the architecture of the game itself.
The source material gets incredibly strange here. Hunt had acquired the source code for this relatively obscure mobile RPG called Fairy Tale Odyssey.
From a very mysterious developer.
Yeah, someone listed in the files as Mr. Joseph Spirit. And, to a normal software engineer, this just looks like a cool indie game project.
But the data architecture of Fairy Tale Odyssey is a complete anomaly.
Because it wasn't written.
Exactly. It wasn't programmed in C++ or Python or Java or any language that relies on standard binary logic gates. The source code was formed from the repressed, crystallized memories of a magical prince named Casey.
Okay, wait, hold on. I need to stop you there.
Sure.
Because you and I have to unpack this for the listener. The physical impossibility of what you just said is wild.
It is definitely hard to wrap your head around.
Right, because a memory is biological. It's a specific pattern of synaptic pathways firing in a brain. Data is binary, just ones and zeros on a microchip.
Right.
So how does the smell of a childhood home or the emotional weight of trauma translate into an executable file format?
Well, it requires a translation layer that completely defies standard physics. And in this specific case, that translation layer is cosmic magic.
Cosmic magic.
Yes. The sources indicate Casey was born with this inherent, reality-altering magical ability. And following a severe childhood trauma, his mind forcibly repressed his memories of his home realm.
But the memories didn't just fade.
Exactly. Because his subconscious was fueled by this cosmic power, the memories crystallized. They manifested into a tangible digital format.
So the magic acted as like a compiler.
Yes. Taking abstract, emotional data and formatting it into a language a computer processor could theoretically read, meaning the code contained literal, actual cosmic power.
Okay, I see the sequence of events there, but I have a huge issue with the hardware interface.
Let's hear it.
Hunt takes this code, right? He runs it through his own proprietary quantum algorithms to build a time-traveling pocket dimension.
Yes, that was his goal, yeah.
He wires this data into his makeshift quantum array and feeds it into a VR headset. He literally wired a cosmic magical artifact into what is essentially a PlayStation and expected it to boot up normally.
I know, it sounds ridiculous.
Isn't that like trying to power a toaster with a nuclear reactor? My laptop overheats when I have too many browser tabs open. How did the hardware not instantly melt into slag?
Your skepticism is entirely justified, and it points directly to Hunt's primary miscalculation. You're viewing the motherboard as a limiting container.
Right.
You assume the hardware dictates what the software can do, but when dealing with localized cosmic magic, that relationship completely inverts.
Why?
The magical code didn't rely on Hunt's processor to render its environment. It used the processor simply as a doorway.
So the magic completely bypassed the physical constraints of the RAM and the CPU.
Precisely. Hunt was trying to impose a localized domestic framework onto a mechanism that dictates fundamental reality.
He looked at the code, saw it defied binary structure, and his ego just convinced him he could tame it.
Yes, with quantum mathematics, it stems from a philosophical theory Hunt heavily subscribes to. He literally believes the mind is another world. He believed consciousness and quantum mechanics were intertwined, but he viewed it entirely theoretically. He expected the code to simulate an advanced virtual environment inside the headset.
He fundamentally failed to anticipate that the cosmic magic would actualize his math into physical reality.
Exactly. He thought he was building a high-res monitor, but the magic built a physical doorway.
And Jace is the one standing directly in front of it.
The worst possible person to be standing there.
The file notes that Hunt realizes things are going critical. He's staring at his monitors, and the readouts aren't showing processing loads. They're showing the manifestation of a tangible pocket dimension.
And Hunt is frantically warning Jace.
He tells him the extraction protocol is untested, the code is unstable, and he explicitly commands him not to put the headset on.
A command which, given Jace's psychological defense mechanisms, functions as an irresistible trigger.
It's the ultimate dare. Jace doesn't even flinch. He just looks at Hunt and says,
Relax, bro. I'm a risk taker. It's my middle name. Hey, did you know my dad was the White Knight, chosen to protect the world in Nintendo? True story, man.
Then he puts it on.
slides the heavily modified visor right over his eyes, and taps the side to engage the power.
Leading to what Hunt later logs as the digitization event.
The sensory details here are brutal. The second the headset powers on, a blinding flash of cerulean light violently erupts from the visor.
And it's not just visual, it carries concussive force.
Right. Hunt is thrown backward, hitting the linoleum floor. The entire foundation of the basement shakes. Every monitor blows out, flashing white.
The smell of burning copper and ozone becomes overwhelming.
And when Hunt finally pushes himself up, puffing through the smoke, Jace is entirely gone, just vanished.
The only trace left is the VR headset lying on the floor, smoking.
The psychological impact on Hunt in this fraction of a second is absolute devastation.
That rigid mathematical safety net he built to protect himself from the chaos of the world just evaporated.
So Hunt scrambles back to his main terminal. He pulls up the diagnostic logs, and the error code is chilling.
What did it say?
It simply reads, matter conversion complete. Entity, J writers digitized. And Hunt just loses it. High-level scientific panic mixed with adolescent terror. He's pacing, pulling his hair out, screaming that he committed quantum manslaughter.
Quantum manslaughter.
He is convinced the authorities are going to breach the basement and charge him with murdering his best friend via computer programming.
Because Hunt is processing this through physical mortality. He thinks he erased a biological system. But from Jace's perspective, inside the digital framework.
The reality is entirely different.
Exactly. Jace's biological matter wasn't destroyed. It was translated.
And the place he gets translated to completely upends what you'd expect from a trapped-in-a-video-game story.
Right. It's not a generic fantasy tavern.
No. He opens his eyes in the center of an unimaginably massive transit terminal known as Game Central Station. The scale is staggering.
The concourse miles long.
Disported by colossal glowing arches, neon signs suspended in midair in English, Japanese, and Hylian.
The fictional language from Zelda.
Yeah. Now, why does this specific hub exist?
It makes logical sense when you understand the code. Because the source code was a bridge of cosmic magic, when Hunt connected his array to the global internet, the magic aggressively sought out compatible structures.
It reached across servers.
Exactly. It established a physical nexus point connecting pre-existing digital intellectual properties.
The visual cognitive dissonance of this space would just break a normal mind. You have distinct art styles and physics engines occupying the exact same 3D space.
It's pure chaos.
The sources describe a flat, blocky, 16-bit dog walking alongside a hyper-realistic, battle-scarred space marine in 4K.
An anime swordsman arguing with a mushroom over a train schedule.
Above it all are these massive departure boards listing game publishers: Capcom, Square Enix, Nintendo.
I really want to focus on Jace's sensory perception here. The human eye processes light and depth based on physical laws. Looking at a 2D sprite interacting with a 3D object in physical space would cause intense neurological confusion.
The brain would just fail to calculate the depth perception.
Right. So how does Jace, who just violently ripped from his body and converted to data, respond to this existential horror?
He embraces it instantly.
Easily.
He pulls out his phone, which somehow digitized with him, says, "Yo, this is wild. I feel great. I think my vertical leap just doubled," and takes a selfie.
A 16-bit selfie.
Yeah. Throwing a peace sign in front of a glowing Nintendo portal, complete with visual compression artifacts, and texts it to Hunt.
While Hunt is having a nervous breakdown in the basement.
Exactly. His phone buzzes with a tourist photo from the digital void. What does this mean for Jace's psyche? Is he oblivious, or is his persona overriding his survival instincts?
It's a massive manifestation of his trauma response. Think about the physical world he left. He was hunted by the Yakuza. Real life is a space where rules are arbitrary and pain is guaranteed.
So he arrives in a universe of video games.
Which is a design system. It has clear rules, defined win states, and narratives built for the protagonist to triumph.
He looks at a reality-bending crisis and sees a playground. Because playgrounds can be mastered, real life can't.
Right. His mind recognizes the digital space as the ultimate escapism. He subconsciously categorizes the danger as a game mechanic. If it's a game, he can beat it.
Acknowledging it as real would force him to drop his armor.
Which he is psychologically incapable of doing.
So he treats it like a weekend trip to an amusement park. Meanwhile, Hunt is begging him to stay still. Hunt explains that Game Central Station is stable, but if Jace steps through a portal, he enters proprietary code environments.
Which means Hunt might lose the IP address tracking entirely.
Hunt asks for just 3 minutes to compile a tether script to yank his data back.
But waiting 3 minutes offers no agency. And Jace is intoxicated by the freedom.
Jace actively refuses. He looks at the glowing Nintendo portal, gives Hunt a mock salute, says, "Wish me luck, bro," and literally walks backward into the portal.
And the diagnostic monitor cuts to black.
Displaying one line, "Player 1 has entered the game. Jace is officially down the rabbit hole."
And the transitions between these IP environments are not smooth. Hunt's quantum array is unstable. It lacks the processing rhythm to hold Jace's data in one location.
So Jace is essentially a corrupted packet of data bouncing between server nodes?
Exactly.
His first stop is Final Fantasy Line 2. He is dropped straight into a turn-based combat sequence facing Garland. I want to unpack this. A biological consciousness experiencing turn-based RPG combat.
It's fascinating.
Jace has real-world combat experience, but suddenly he's in a physics engine where he has to stand completely still while a knight swings a massive sword at him just because it isn't his turn.
The psychological dissonance would be immense. His natural fight-or-flight reflexes are being overridden by the game's battle system.
His digital avatar is locked in a waiting animation dictated by an invisible ATB gauge.
Right, the active time battle system.
Before he can adapt, Hunt's erratic code yanks him again. He materializes in Final Fantasy II immediately in the clutches of the Lamia Queen.
Disguised as Princess Hilda.
Yes. He's briefly rescued by Firion, Guy, and Maria, but the second they prepare to travel, the tether snaps him away.
It's a relentless cycle of sudden crisis, followed by sudden displacement. He's denied narrative resolution.
Which causes severe cognitive side effects when he lands in Super Mario RPG. The sources note a wild detail here.
Oh, about the memory corruption.
Yes. In Mario RPG, he crosses paths with characters who later become crucial allies. Christian, Chrome, and even Casey himself.
But Hunt's failing tether script causes an extraction that acts like a hard system crash.
Describe that, because it's like biological memory versus computer RAM, right?
Exactly. When a program closes suddenly, the active data in the RAM is flushed. Jace's biological brain is trying to form long-term synaptic pathways. But because he's digital data, bouncing between servers aggressively wipes the active cache.
Before the memories can write to his long-term storage.
Right. He forgets he ever met them the millisecond he gets pulled out.
And while Jace is dealing with forced amnesia, Hunt is sitting in the dark in New York, completely out of his depth. His tether script has entirely failed.
He can't locate Jace's coordinates within the Nintendo network.
The situation has escalated. Hunt has to do the one thing a teenager desperately wants to avoid when they break something.
He has to call the parents.
Total surrender of ego. He calls Jace's mother Meili Yoshida. Imagine explaining to a mother that you accidentally converted her son into a localized JPEG, and he's dodging fireballs in the Mushroom Kingdom.
And incredibly, she does not panic.
No. She instructs Hunt to contact Jace's uncle, Andre Dementio.
A massive logistical pivot. Andre works as a senior game developer for Nintendo EA Tokyo, stationed in Kyoto.
So he actually has the architectural knowledge of these spaces?
Yes.
But the logistics. Hunt is a traumatized teen in New York in the middle of the night. Andre is in Kyoto with a 16-hour time difference. Together, they have to do international remote pair programming.
Which, even under ideal conditions, is difficult.
And these are not ideal conditions. They aren't finding a missing semicolon in a banking app. They are trying to reverse engineer magically infused quantum script across the globe.
While the user experiencing the bugs is actively fighting boss monsters.
It's like trying to rewrite the genetic code of a virus while it's multiplying in your bloodstream using a magnifying glass.
The stress is immense. But as Andre analyzes the data packets, they uncover the foundational mechanic of the Fairy Tale Odyssey code.
The failsafe.
Yes. The code manifested from Casey's repressed memories. It's an artifact of trauma. Because of that, it possesses an innate biological defense mechanism.
It was designed to be inhabited exclusively by Casey.
Exactly. So when Hunt shoved Jace's mind into it, the system recognized a foreign anomaly.
It flagged Jace as a malicious virus.
Right. The internal immune system triggered an automatic response to isolate and purge the threat.
Jace is no longer just lost. He is actively being hunted by the architecture of reality itself.
Hunt and Andre map out the resolutions, and they are grim. Option A, Jace can play through Fairy Tale Odyssey as the main character, Galen Flynn.
But because he's flagged as a virus...
The moment he completes the game, the system will execute a final purge command. Permanent deletion.
A profound cruelty. It forces him to survive, only to execute him at the finish line. What about option B?
Complete a consecutive 13-game speedrun across major IP titles. But the mathematical outcome is identical. Total deletion upon completing the 13th game.
Which forces Hunt and Andre to consider the only alternative. A brute force hardware extraction.
Sever the connection and physically rip Jace's consciousness out.
But the math on that is brutal. A sudden extraction carries a 75% risk of permanent, severe brain damage.
The logs explicitly compare it to Sword Art Online.
Right. If Hunt hits the kill switch, there's a 75% certainty Jace wakes up brain dead. Only a 15% probability he survives intact.
And while they agonize over the moral weight, Jace is forced to keep moving. The immune response escalates, forcing a grueling speedrun of pure survival.
The cognitive demands here are incomprehensible. First, he drops into Soul Calibur, a 3D fighting environment focused on weapon weight and momentum.
He has to learn actual sword fighting techniques, and the tactile feedback translates resistance into sensory data.
His translated consciousness processes it as physical strain, and then he's snapped into Tekken. The physics change entirely. No sword. Close quarters martial arts, juggle mechanics.
And then Mortal Kombat, a massive escalation.
Hyperbolic, anatomically impossible violence. He is seconds away from suffering a fatality. He has to process the terror of facing an opponent who can rip his spine out.
The speed of his adaptation is unprecedented.
From there, into the 2D side-scrolling architecture of Metroid, alien isolation, battling Mother Brain, then the grid-based logic of Mega Man, dodging pixel-perfect lasers from Dr. Wily.
And the gothic geometry of Castlevania, teaming up with Simon Belmont to fight Dracula.
I really want to focus on the paradox Jace is experiencing. He's digital data, but the sensory experiences, the pain, the muscle memory are writing themselves into his consciousness as real.
He is rapidly growing stronger. His reflexes are adapting.
But his biological brain in the basement is hovering on the brink of a 75% chance of destruction. He's evolving into a god in the machine while sitting on death row.
How does a human nervous system compartmentalize that?
Exactly. He feels a Tekken combo while knowing the extraction might leave him vegetative.
It requires profound psychological bifurcation. Jace retreats entirely into his badass man of justice persona. It becomes his literal armor against the mathematical reality.
He separates the immediate mechanical requirement from the philosophical weight of brain death. If he focuses on the numbers, his reaction time slows, and the game kills him.
But the source code's immune system doesn't care about his coping mechanisms. It escalates to an active, overwhelming purge protocol.
The system summons a patch, but this isn't a software update. It manifests visually. The sky begins to tear open.
It takes the form of a reality-eating black hole.
It's actively devouring the data structure of the world. Backgrounds, NPCs, the ground itself erased into a void, and it's tracking directly toward Jace.
The environment is collapsing. Hunt and Andre have no time left to refine the extraction algorithm.
Jace watches his reality dissolve. The gravitational pull is dragging him in. He opens the comm link to Hunt, Andre, and Mr. Spirit, who miraculously manifested in Kyoto to help.
And Jace fully embraces his identity. He doesn't ask for a new calculation.
He directly orders them to execute the brute force extraction immediately, knowing full well there's a 75% chance of destroying his mind.
Because the alternative is 100% deletion by the black hole.
He screams for them to execute it and physically leaps directly into the collapsing void at the exact millisecond they hit the kill switch.
The tether severs. The connection is violently ripped apart.
The sensory whiplash in the physical world is immediate. The VR headset emits a high-pitched mechanical scream. Jace's body arches violently backward.
And then complete silence.
The hum of the cables dies. Hunt is frozen. The sources note this silence lasted for several agonizing seconds. Did the math land on 75% or 15%?
The statistical coin flip.
Jace takes a sharp breath, opens his eyes, sits up, looks at Hunt, and cracks a joke. He hit the 15% miracle.
Unbelievable luck.
His synaptic pathways held together. Hunt collapses into tears of relief. The chat client from Kyoto floods with celebratory messages. Jace survived the brutal logic of the game worlds.
Framed as a moment of profound triumph.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there.
Oh.
Because I read every page of the source file, including the addendums. We just spent all this time dissecting quantum physics, a reality-eating black hole, the 75% brain death risk.
Right.
But there is a detail hidden at the very end that completely subverts the entire crisis. The sources reveal a massively ridiculous truth about how they could have saved him from the beginning.
The secondary extraction protocol utilized by his mother.
Yes. It is the most jarring anti-climax. I need you to explain exactly what Meili Ishida did while the geniuses were sweating over Python scripts.
Well, while Hunt and Andre were agonizing over syntax errors, Meili opted for a dramatically more pragmatic approach.
She realized her son was trapped in the Nintendo IP network.
So rather than fighting the code, she simply called Mario.
She called Mario the Italian plumber.
Yes, she contacted him directly. And Mario, operating on the whimsical logic of the Nintendo universe, gladly agreed to help.
He built a physical warp pipe?
He connected a standard green warp pipe from Super Mario RPG, bored a hole through the digital barrier, and routed the exit directly into the Yoshida family's physical living room.
I need a moment. Hunt is hyperventilating over the ethical weight of pulling a plug. Jace is getting punched in the face in Tekken to avoid a black hole.
Treating it like Apollo 13.
And it was completely pointless. Jace could have literally walked to a spot in the Mushroom Kingdom, hopped into a green plastic pipe, and popped out onto his mother's rug.
With zero risk of brain damage.
The documentation actually confirms the functionality. Shortly after recovering, Jace goes home, climbs into the warp pipe in his living room, travels seamlessly into the game, and travels back out.
It works perfectly, completely bypassing the violent quantum translation issues Hunt was struggling to solve.
Relying entirely on established Mario magic, I cannot fathom the absolute crushing defeat Hunt must have experienced.
Oh, it's profoundly humbling.
You try to play God with cosmic magic and quantum mechanics. You think you murdered your friend. And then you find out you got outsmarted by a guy in denim overalls who just piped a solution into the den.
It reminds him that the universe does not always conform to his rigid mathematical expectations.
Hunt is so humiliated, he dismantles Project QC entirely. Unplugs the cables, boxes the headset, tears down the table. He decides to just play Fairy Tale Odyssey normally on his touchscreen phone.
He completely taps out of theoretical physics.
The most chaotic summer ends not with a Nobel Prize, but with a green plastic plumbing fixture in a living room.
It's wild.
We need to wrap this up because this deep dive has been massive. We started with a traumatized genius, tracked a digital translation, explored survival speedruns, and ended with a plumber.
But beneath all that, it really cemented a profound dynamic between these two boys. Jace's reckless resilience and Hunt's desperate devotion to saving his friend.
Their psychological landscapes were forever altered.
But before we sign off, there's a philosophical question for you, the listener, to mull over.
Lay it on us.
Jace returned physically intact. But we established that the Fairy Tale Odyssey code wasn't just data. It was constructed from the crystallized memories of a magical entity.
It was cosmic magic that interfaced with his neurology.
Exactly. He spent subjective weeks inside those networks, fighting, bleeding, pouring his raw will into the environment. If the code was built from memory, it stands to reason it records memory.
Meaning the digital environments absorbed his data.
So did Jace leave a piece of his own consciousness behind in that architecture?
Oh, wow.
When we immerse ourselves so completely into virtual spaces, pouring our emotions into an avatar, do we ever truly leave those spaces when we disconnect?
Or do ghost versions of us, fragmented echoes, continue to inhabit the code?
Endlessly fighting monsters and running the speedrun long after the physical headset has been unplugged.
That concept completely changes how I view saved data. It brings us right back to that dark basement. You think you're just looking at a broken science experiment.
But the diagnostic landscape of the human mind is terrifyingly murky.
Endlessly murky. Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive. Keep questioning the logic of the worlds around you, whether they're built from physical concrete or 16-bit pixels. We'll catch you next time.